like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are standing on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, and also want to recognize what's been happening throughout our province and the devastation, and to just give kudos, or as they like to say in the forces, bravo Zulu, to our very own 442 squadron that we have at 19 Wing Comox, and the outstanding work that they've been doing 24 hours a day the last few days to help people stranded. So you see them on the street, thank them. And the first item is the adoption of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. We don't have any delegations. So for regular council meeting minutes from November 3rd for approval.
Second.
Any questions on that? All in favor? Okay, thank you. And the public hearing meeting minutes from November 3rd.
Second.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Moving down, Strategic Planning Committee meeting minutes from November 10th for receipt.
Second.
Any questions on that? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, thank you. And the consent agenda, if I get a motion and a seconder for the whole thing? All in favor? Okay, so anybody want to pick anything out? Councillor Minions.
Yeah, I was just looking to pull out number 4 and number 8. If I have a seconder on those two. Second.
Okay, so go ahead.
So I was just curious on the air shed. I know that we didn't have kind of a counselor or staff member that was going to that, but has that group, the air shed advisory committee, had any recent reports or meetings that we're aware of as far as where they were at? Because the last kind of meeting I was aware of was 6 or 7 months ago. So I'm just curious if staff know any update on where they're at for regional district.
Yeah, so actually I've been joining one of the breakout groups from that meeting, which is the air quality in the urban areas. So we've been meeting, the information is going back to the larger group. So I don't have a timeline off the top of my head of when the next group meeting is taking place or when we're looking at the actions, but I can find out and get back to you. But Comox has been participating in the looking at solutions to wood smoke in urban areas.
And I guess the purpose of that group will be eventually to give action items or suggested action items from that group.
Yeah, so the feedback that we've asked or that we've provided to the group is that what we're hoping to get out of this are specific actions, as well as authorities, whether or not municipalities have the authority to do it, and potential mitigating measures such as grants or rebates in order to reduce wood smoke. So we are asking for specific actions that municipalities can take coming out.
And,
Thank you.
and I can say that we did get a report on this at the RD, what, a couple of months back? About a couple of months probably. And it's very slow moving. There are a lot of diverse opinions at the roundtable. It's actually a really good group in that respect. You're getting a lot of different, but there's also, there's a really diverse bunch of opinions on how to go. So it's slowly moving, but I think that the result will probably be pretty good when it comes, because it will have encompassed everybody. So, but it is admittedly moving very slowly just because of that.
Sounds good. Yeah, I just think because of the time of year, we're going to be hearing more and more about it. So it's always good to know where that group is at so we can update people that ask us about it.
Okay, and number 8.
Yeah, number 8 was in regards to the property on Comox Ave there, and kind of on building and planning's perspective of, is there pre-work that goes into before a permit is given on what, like, the nuisance from like water displacement would cause from building? Or is it really once you have your piece of property, those things can be done? I'm just curious a little bit more on if that's common to happen, where someone builds retaining walls and then can, in theory, negatively affect the property, or just an overview on that.
Yes and no in terms of how common it is. So historically, no. The homes were smaller, they were of less value. Now the homes are much higher value, and therefore the amount of money that people are willing to put into the home just is a lot. And in terms of leveling off the property has increased. So we're going to see additional site improvements that typically we hadn't seen in the past. In this case, if it's a retaining wall holding back, I believe, more than 4 feet, that building permit is required. It has to be engineered. The wall in question there was a building permit required and engineered. in terms of the impact on water, under common law, from one property to the other, you can't alter a drainage pattern, natural drainage pattern that causes a nuisance or damages on either upstream or downstream. And if you do, then you are liable, or you can be liable for being taken to court for damages. And that's addressed through the courts in terms of private property. Our powers in regards to things like grades are marginal at best, and municipalities that have gotten into it, there's limited what they can do, and it's proven to be very costly and time uses up quite a bit of time, and the town tends to get dragged into neighbor disputes as opposed to actual water issues. The primary aspect here was, in terms of our bylaws, is if you put fill into a lot, you do not raise the maximum house height, because the maximum house height is determined based on the average grade as the building is situated on the lot prior to the fill. So in this case, the lot could have been left exactly like it was, and a house built to that height, exactly as shown when you're looking from Comox Avenue.
Okay, so it sounds like anything over 4 feet would always need that engineer's report, and really the risk goes back onto the property owner from that point on. If there are water issues, it's basically on the landowner or on the property owner.
So just the same as landscape. Somebody doing landscaping and landscape ties with additional fill.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Could we pull out number 5? I'll move that we pull out number 5.
Second,
Yeah, number 5, and then I think that'll probably fall in with number 1 as well.
I didn't see. that.
Yeah,
So I'm
number
not-
1
not
and
on the list.
1 and 5 are the
Is it? All right,
fireworks.
well, that's fair
Yeah,
enough.
yeah. So all in favor of that? All right. So go ahead.
Now I can't find the letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, the fireworks are becoming a bigger and bigger issue, and my take is that it's the fireworks shot down at the bottom of the dike on the KFN lands that are the problem. And I know that we don't have any jurisdiction over what goes on there, but I'm wondering if we could send them a letter, just letting them know that it's a big issue for our community, and if there's anything they could do to help mitigate that, because I do have to admit that fireworks shop, I believe, is open all year round, and you do hear them periodically throughout the year, but at Halloween, it was a lot worse this year than usual. And so I'm not sure, I mean, I know we can't really do anything, but I think they should know that we're not
Yeah.
happy about what's going on. And I know also that we can't really tie it directly to them, but it's more than coincidence that the shop opened and then the problem started, so.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is all the time. And the CIO and I were talking about that today, and you were saying you have a few comments on that, were you?
I was just going to mention that on Halloween, we did have 2 bylaw officers out, and they were fairly successful in handing out warnings and fines. So there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 warnings or fines handed out for fireworks on Halloween night, which was very good. But as far as whether or not council wanted to send a letter or regarding this to KFN, that would be up to you. I can tell you that at the staff level, I've had conversations with them, but that's much different than council sending a letter asking for something to be done.
I'll be meeting with Chief Rempel on Friday, and I could bring it up as just a gentle conversation and see where they stand on that, because I'm sure it's a bit of a bother for them too, but
Well,
can't speak for them.
I would suggest that maybe sending them a letter is a little more stern, and then we've got something in writing, and then if people do complain, we can say, look, we're doing what we can do, but it's really up to them to make the call. But all the talk, it happens every year, and then nothing changes. So I would propose that a letter might be a better idea, and I'd make the motion if you want.
Do you need a motion on that, CAO? Yeah, so.
So I'd move that we send KFN a letter regarding the sale of fireworks on KFN territory.
Right, okay, seconder?
second,
And any other further discussion on that? All in favor? Great, thank you. Okay. And anything else, Councillor Grant? Okay, anyone else? I'd like to pull out number 3. And with that one, there is a 2 requests. There's a letter and just a welcoming letter from the town of Comox, but there's also a financial contribution they're looking for. So I'd like to propose that we at least write the letter welcoming this curling, junior curling folks to the area. I think we're a little early in the whole budget process to look at donating any kind of money for it, but so I'll move that we send a letter welcoming the groups of the Comox Valley. Okay, any discussion on that? All in favor? Okay, so we'll do that. Unless council wants to donate the money, but I'll let somebody else make that motion. So.
Looking to see exactly how much money they're thinking.
Yeah, I
Not that I'm
think-
thinking of sending it. It's just
Yeah,
like
no, I
they
think
said,
it was like
"Well,
$100 or something to get like our town logo put on something.
Oh, so it's a sponsorship kind of
Sponsorship,
thing.
yeah.
Oh,
So, all right. So anything further on the consent agenda? Okay, moving on. Unfinished business for the strategic priorities from November 17th for receipt.
Second.
And any questions on that? So all in favor? Okay, and we had the joint working group of the substance use report. So they're requesting staff supported funding. Yeah,
Can I move that to provide, as from what I gather, it's just a couple hours here and there of kind of consultation time and, I'd like to refer the funding part to budget, but, yeah, I'd like to support them in general.
so did we have a
Second.
seconder? Okay, seconder. So for discussion, anyone? Councilor Grant?
So
And then minions.
I can't remember off the top of my head from a week or two ago, but how much, are we already doing the staff time? Are we already putting some staff time towards this, or would this be in addition to what we already do? And what kind of impact would that have on our operations if we were to do that, I guess?
So I've attended a couple meetings with this group or on this topic at least. It would really be time. So I think your question was what would be the impact? I would say any hour that we spend on this project or attending this is an hour and we're not doing it a different project. So it's really up to council on whether or not this is a high enough priority to warrant us spending the time on it. It sounds like they're looking for not a major commitment from staff, but there certainly will be time. And again, any time we spend on this is time we don't spend on another project. So that prioritization is really for council to decide.
So would it be more time than you've already spent? Are you thinking they want more time than you've already spent, or?
I believe they're looking for an ongoing commitment.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not, yeah, it's for future time to spend, yes.
Do you know, has it been brought up to the RD at all? Because if there was staff time, you think it would come from the RD, it's a regional. Sorry?
It would take every community to coordinate and make sure that it's fully covered and we get all the information and support possible.
So it did come to the RD, and I think we said that staff would be involved, but don't forget, they've got about 10 times more staff than we do too. So that's an issue, but it's an important issue that I think needs to be addressed. And I just want to make sure that, I guess my question wasn't totally answered, and that is, we didn't, you've been going to some of these meetings and it hasn't had a really burdensome effect. And I'm wondering if that's the commitment going forward, or if it's a bigger commitment.
Yeah, and hard to say, I guess, is like what time.
I'm not sure. So this group this request wasn't something I spoke with them about before they came. I think that they've generally been having conversations at the board level, not at the staff level for this stuff. So I don't know what the commitment is going to be or what it may grow into in the future.
Okay, Councilor Minions and then Swift.
Yeah, on the finance side, I agreed with kind of putting it to budget and seeing where we're at and seeing where they come up with. They were going to go talk to some of the MLAs, FPs in different groups. So that's kind of an unknown amount at this time, but I'm wondering if we can go back to them and find out if there'd be some hybrid between like a counselor and staff, or, where you have where someone may be able to attend instead of staff and just report back to the group versus have staff time necessarily. Because I think it would be important to keep connected even if there is a regional district person, but it wouldn't necessarily have to be staff. So I'm not sure if one of us or staff could follow up to find out if that could work for them.
Okay, and Councillor Swift.
I guess this is an important issue and I think we need to support it. But I guess my question goes along the lines of your comments. And would you see yourself continuing, Jordan, or would you be able to find another staff member, or how would, I don't know that we don't have a particularly good fit with our staff in terms of skill set. So I'm just
How
wondering.
about everybody look over at Matt?
Well, there we go. Yeah. But anyway, I'm just wondering if it's a really good use of your time or how you would see this going forward.
Yeah, so we had a conversation at the staff level of who would go to this. Part of it, we need to have a conversation with them on what skill sets they're looking for and who in the organization they want to work with. But we've identified possibly either bylaw or somebody from the fire department to attend, because they generally deal with those issues on the ground more than I would. But again, that is dependent on what they're looking for. So I don't know exactly which staff member they want and whether or not they'd be happy to work with bylaw or fire, or if they're looking for more senior decision makers in the organization for policy changes.
Councillor Grant.
So it sounds to me like we need to go back to them and find out exactly what they're looking for. And once we have it narrowed down, then we can make a decision. So is that a fair?
Well, Councillor Miguel.
Oh, I just wanted to add that I have been attending the substance use strategy committee meetings, so that that part we did actually assign me to, I think last year when it started. So that part is done. But yeah, having a conversation about who would be best is definitely suitable. But I do think that saving lives is worth the time spent by staff.
So I'm just looking at the logistics of this. We have a motion on the floor that sounds like we need to defeat it and then go back to them and ask for more info, or I'm not sure how we proceed.
Yeah,
from
or
here.
amend it. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, this is kind of asking council what direction you want to go. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Okay. How about we take a vote on it? If it is defeated, then another motion just to direct staff to check on them. But Councillor,
What is the motion? Do we even have a motion on the floor?
yeah, there's a motion to proceed with staff time, and then as Councillor Minion said, look at the financial components another time. So yeah, we just verbally tell them. Yeah, fair enough. Okay. So all in favor of appointing a staff person to this?
If you want to get more info, you have to defeat this.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you have to defeat it, but then we don't need to bring another motion after.
right.
So
So-
if you want to get more info, you have to defeat this.
Yes, and then we'll have staff reach out to the group. You almost had me putting my hand up, Alex. I was wondering. Okay. Yeah, did you have a question, Councillor?
Well, I was just gonna follow up though, if we would be willing to send a staff member, not sure who it is, I would still be in favor of that. So just, anyway, never mind. We can vote on sending a staff member and just not have it determined yet. And have that
But we
discussion.
just want to see what kind of time frame we'd be putting our staff. Would we use the time of our CAO, or would we use the firefighter, or would we use Matt? Those are the things I think we're looking for at this time. Councillor McGowan? Yeah.
Marvin's always looking for something to do too.
Councillor McGowan.
Well, I think quite possibly the staff member might have to do with them coming to consult perhaps, rather than just one particular staff member. But if they're coming to talk about building or bylaw, depending on what the issue is, they might need to consult with different staff members instead of just one single person. Just a thought that we might want to think about.
Yeah, and I think that leads to having a CAO or someone in staff talk with these folks a little bit more to see what they're looking for. And then, I see us ultimately doing something, but just what we're doing, I think, is the question right now. So all in favor of appointing a staff member at this point to this group? All in favor? A particular staff member. Opposed? Okay,
And
All
then I
right,
guess we
so-
should make maybe
so
just,
1 in favor, 5 opposed.
yeah. And then maybe just a statement for the public to clarify.
Yeah,
what we're
that
actually-
we will be directing staff to have a conversation with this group and seeing what it is that we can do to help move this along. The timeframe, you know, how much time we're looking at putting our.
Why
Yeah.
don't we just make that motion so that it's on the record?
Well, that's what I was
It
wondering.
just looks
but
bad
then-
if we defeat it and then there's nothing else that actually gets picked up other than.
Okay, so
Yeah,
let's,
so let's-
so put a motion forward then. So
So
that
to have
that-
staff.
that we have,
staff look-
that we have the
Seek
CAO.
more information as to what staff would be appropriate and the actual time commitment required by said staff.
Right. Seconder?
Second.
Okay, so any further discussion? All in favor? All right, that's carried. Thank you. You got that, CAO?
I got it.
Perfect.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, it's not quite 6 o'clock yet, so we have subdivided attention. Okay, so we'll move on to bylaw adoptions. This is the rezoning application RZ 20-4, the urban agriculture. So we have 3 recommendations. All right, I'm just buzz back up to my spot here. We,
Can I move recommendations 1 through 3 CAO together
sure,
for discussion?
yes. You want a
Second.
seconder?
Second,
Okay, so for discussion. For discussion? Councillor Minnis, you wanted,
I
Sure.
put my hand up after.
okay, sorry, I was flipping through here to find my spot, so who had their hand up first? All right, Steph, go ahead. Councillor,
Okay. So I will try to keep this short, as I do believe that these points have mostly been made before, but I would like to reiterate a few things. When we first started this journey of exploring urban agriculture and hen keeping, we were mid-pandemic and food security was on a lot of people's minds. Now that things have calmed down, it seems that some have forgotten the lessons we learned during that time. Those food security is still just as precarious situation as when things were shut down. If I remember correctly, staff were holding off on bringing a report forward until Courtney had gone through the process so we could align with them. And I recall a conversation about not wanting to have different rules between the communities as it would be confusing. So we were holding off. But that also seems to have moved to the wayside. And while I did go into the public hearing expecting it to be more polarized and was open to listening to all sides, the public opinion seems to be overwhelmingly in favor of hens, at least the people that showed up. So while only 2 households came forward against, 3 people, but 2 households, there was more than 3 times that amount speaking in favor. And many of them spoke out on previously mentioned points, and including the 1,500 meter lot sizing, requesting that be reconsidered to conform with the rest of the valley. So the whole process seems to like it has moved more swiftly than usual, and that does make me slightly uncomfortable. So I just wanted to thank you for listening and wanted to have that on the record. Thank you.
great, thank you. And was it Councillor Swift next? And then we'll go minions and then this.
Thank you. It was interesting to hear people speak on this issue, as it's highly charged and people are passionate on both sides of the question. Unfortunately, it's very polarizing and divisive in the community. I think there's little room for any gray areas, but I believe this bylaw is attempting to achieve. This is something I think the bylaw is attempting to achieve with limiting the lot size, but this restriction only seems to make everybody unhappy. So I'm concerned about that. It's also clear that individual households are prepared to ignore our regulations, as chickens are already being raised in the community. The individuals with experience that spoke about the need for regulations and education, and I think we all agree about that, but we're not set up to do this and must rely on other organizations to provide this. There is no denial that chickens and their feed attract rats and other pests. It appears there are some measures that can be taken to lessen the attraction, but no one claims it will be down to zero. I feel for the resident whose garden shed and attic were overrun by the rats from his neighbor's chickens. I've also told you the story of the rats eating the wiring in the car when that was an expensive fix. And 2 summers ago, I used chicken manure in the pots on my own deck. The result was twofold. The odor made it unbearable to sit on the deck for several weeks. You would not want to be subjected to that on an ongoing and continuing fresh basis. The flowers and vegetables that were produced were fantastic, but I vowed to find another soil supplement going forward. I imagine a few well-tended chickens can be raised without issue, but if there are issues, it will require a complaint. This is very divisive in a neighborhood. I believe when we choose to live in a neighborhood, we are agreeing to a social contract about how to live agreeably together. It can be hurtful and embarrassing for everyone when a complaint is filed. The other choice is to live unhappily, as we have seen in some of the correspondence. I agree that the eggs produced provide a degree of food security for the family that raises them. I can also see the benefits that these funny animals bring to a family in terms of education and stress relief. No one speaks of the economics of it. By the time you build a structure, acquire the chickens, and the ongoing feed costs, I don't imagine it is very cheap. But like any other pet, you accept the responsibilities and costs of ownership. Hopefully, you would treat them humanely. Having weighed the pros and cons of raising chickens in an urban setting, I still believe the benefits brought to the few that take this on do not outweigh the detriment brought to the many of the surrounding neighbors. We have seen incredible disasters in the province this week. Whole communities flooded, supply chains completely disrupted, and store shelves bare. We like to imagine that being able to raise your own food would assist. In these horrific conditions, I suspect that more was lost than was gained. And as you evacuate and have to leave your chickens behind. Thank you for listening. I've given the matter considerable thought. My idealistic side says chickens would be a benefit, but my practical side says no. I will not be supporting this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Minions, and then business.
Thank you. I'll block next. The challenge that I have with the current motion in front of us is that it's an arbitrary 1,500 square foot lot, which approximately cuts out 80% of residents, including residents that are currently raising hens for their community or their family for food consumption. The challenge here is there'll always be things in neighborhoods that can possibly cause a nuisance to neighbors, such as it could be something like your barking dogs, your children jumping on trampolines. So when we look at something like food security and growing food for, protein for your family, I simply cannot support where it's 1,500 square feet, and someone like myself who may have a third of an acre but has no interest raising chickens can do so, and many of my neighbors on my same street cannot. These are people that have been raising hens for the past 10 years, and we've seen approximately 10 complaints over 10 years, mostly with one property. So we're seeing it being done successfully in our community. And so it's a challenge here in that I wish we would rethink this, but I would vote for this to show that when we do have 20% of properties with chickens, that we don't see very many complaints, and people choosing to raise hens will do so with the education and the support from their community that they need. But I do sincerely wish that in these times where we are seeing roads being washed out, 25 to 50,000 animals approximately washed out in Abbotsford, that we would highly consider that people have the right to raise their food on their own individual properties, and that, like many other things, respect for neighbors and communities rat control and all those things would be considered. So I'm disappointed that we are looking at these arbitrary numbers tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissinger.
Thank you. I just want to echo what Councillor McGowan and Councillor Manions have said, and realizing that we've had the public hearing, and I think the only way forward at this point is to vote in favor of the motion as it is, as 1,500 or not. So I will support it. I think my question at this point is, how do we get to reduce that number, and when can we do that, or when can we do another public hearing and do another vote? As everyone said, we've seen what the shelves look like, even for milk right now, and eggs and butter. Costco's got basically empty shelves at the moment, and we're not even affected by floods specifically in our town here. So it's definitely real, and it's at the forefront of everyone's minds right now. And we've seen, I think it was 6 complaints over the past 10 years, of which 3 were for that same property. So I don't see it as a nuisance any more than RVs parked in people's front yards, or apple trees that don't get picked in the track rats. Thanks. So actually, question to the CO then, what is the next step if we wanted to reduce the actual parcel size required?
Assuming that the bylaw is adopted today, then if council wanted to reconsider smaller parcel size, it would just need to be a motion made to amend the bylaw. We would bring a staff report, and then depending on what level of investigations council wanted us to do, we would either look at creating a staff report with that investigation, or if council wanted to move directly to a public hearing to make the amendments, we would do that.
So it can't be done right now, is what you're saying, or it can? It can't.
Sorry, did you?
Like, can we
you
amend
mean
it right now or not?
If you wanted to amend the bylaw right now to have smaller parcel sizes, is that the question? Okay, so prior to adoption. Our recommendation, if you want to increase the type of use on properties, would be to go to a second public hearing. And so if council were to make that amendment today, you couldn't adopt it anyway. So council, you can't, after 3rd reading, and when you're looking to adoption, fundamentally change a bylaw. You can do things like move a comma, move a period, don't change the intent of the bylaw. But if you're making a change for intent, you'd have to go back and make the change at a different reading. So that's what we would look to do. We'd look to repeal 3rd reading. We would get the language in that council wanted us to do. We would have a public hearing, and then bring it back for adoption.
So probably in the best interest to adopt it as it is, and then do a separate motion at another meeting.
I think that's asking for, I'd have to turn that question back to what you think is best. If you think it's best to get this change in as is and then work towards more change, that would be the right thing to do. But that's more of a personal question than I can answer.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Yeah, so after the public hearing, I listened to what everybody had to say, and I think to a T, the people that were, and there was only 13, by the way, it wasn't an overwhelming amount in my opinion. There was about 9 or 10, I think, that spoke in favor. But I think almost to a person, they said, we need education, we need setbacks, we need rules around cleanliness, noise, rats. Basically, what we need is enforcement. And our bylaw department is already busy beyond belief. We will not be enforcing this. If we were to enforce it, we'd have to hire another bylaw person, and that person would be up to $100,000 a year. So who's going to pay for that, and who's going to do the education, and who's going to make sure? When we look at why people don't complain, most people don't want to turn their neighbor. They don't want to have to walk out and ignore them on the way out the door. I was privy to a letter that came from someone who had complained about a chicken coop, and the chicken person, I guess for lack of a better expression, trotted over with a letter. And now it's this. It's already starting. We haven't even passed the bylaw yet. So I also talked to a chicken farmer, and he said, if you want $20 a dozen eggs, this is a great way to do it, because there's more expense, more work, and it's a lot harder than you think. I've also talked to many people in the community, and I bring this up to just about everybody I speak to, and it's almost nobody that thinks that this is a good idea. that I've been speaking to, and I haven't salted the mine in the question. I think that for me, this is an issue that we should have left well enough alone. This was a brought to council issue that we brought to our own table. It's divisive and it is causing problems. And there really wasn't much of an issue before we did this. And I would suggest that if we were to just leave well enough alone, those that have them are fine. If someone complains, we can deal with it. If we're only getting a few complaints, that would probably be the right way to deal with this. And I think I said that at the beginning. But now that you bring in rules and regulations, if someone does complain, you're going to have to enforce. And this is going to be more of a problem than what we had in the first place. So for me, I won't be voting in favor of this, but I would say leave well enough alone. I don't think there's any need to go and enforce unless someone complains, and just leave it as it is. I don't think anyone was really very unhappy with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Comments? Councilor Minions, you moved 1, 2, and 3, and it was second?
Correct.
Okay. So all in favor of 1, 2, and 3? And opposed? All right, 2 opposed. All right, and for number 4, the amendment bylaw 1989 be adopted.
Moved.
Moved.
Second.
Okay, any questions on that? All in favor? All right. Okay, so moving on to new business, this is development variance permit application DBP 21-6 at 266 Stewart Street. So there is a recommendation that we approve. That.
Second.
Any questions on that? All in favor? All right, good, thank you.
Ask a subsequent question.
There's never a stupid question.
Subsequent.
Oh, subsequent, oh, I'm sorry.
Stupid
Sorry, I
subsequent
thought you,
question.
I
There you go.
thought you said
Is
that.
So, there's like the new regulation, maybe it's a question for the CAO or the planner, but there's those new regulations coming from the provincial government that's going to leave more discretion up to the planning department. Would this be sort of one of them? It fits the OCP, fits the criteria, then we just wouldn't see it and it'd be an easier application, or?
I don't believe the province has actually sat down and talked with us about what this is going to look like. We've shared with council all the information they've given to us on this topic, which is fairly high level. Have you seen anything come by? Yeah, so no specifics on what powers they're actually going to give us. So hopefully they reach out and engage. I believe the bill is received 3rd reading, so it's almost adopted. So hopefully they sit down and talk to us sometime soon, because we're about to have a bunch of new powers that we don't know what to do with.
And a cape? You got a cape? Yeah. Okay, so you're good with that, Councillor Bissinger? All right, so we're moving on to sorry, sometimes this thing jumps ahead of me, and these are the sewer, water, sewer, and refuse fees rates. And
I guess we'll move number 1. Since I can move 1, 2 there.
1, 2, and 3 are together. So our CAO, we can move the 3 of them together? No, you want them all individual. Okay, so second, okay, for discussion. Yeah. Councillor Swift, yeah.
Thank you. I really don't have a question. I just have a comment. This just highlights the need to have our entire community metered. It is extremely inequitable the way it is, particularly for those on a flat rate, and some of them will be charged more because they're on a meter. So it's just my own continuing frustration with water rates and how inequitable they are. But I appreciate that we need to pay for the water that's used as a community as a whole, and we can't really do much more about it until we're entirely metered.
Okay, any other questions on that? So, so this is number 1, that the amendment bylaw 1991 be given first reading. So all in favor? All right. And number 2, that amendment bylaw 1991 be given second reading.
Second.
Questions? All in favor? And that the 1991 be given 3rd reading. Questions? All in favor? All right, thank you. And number 4, we have the sewer user rates amendment bylaw 1992 be given first reading.
Second.
Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Councillor Grant.
So in the water report, it mentioned that it was about an $18 a year increase, but in the sewer, it just said a 5.9%, and it didn't give a number. I took a guess at about $25. Is that? Am I correct, or did I miss that number?
And if Jeffrey's there, he might have the answer. I do have something I can calculate quickly here. But Jeffrey, if you happen to have that answer.
Oh, there he is.
I'm looking at $25.55, Jeffrey. You have confirmed that?
Looks like-
That looks right to me on 12 months.
Maybe I just didn't see it.
25.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's, so I guess pretty close. Okay, that's good. So I guess when we look at our water, sewer, garbage rates all in, we're raising those about $52 a year. And I don't think there's really a lot we can do about that. I mean, a lot of this is from contracts with other organizations that are passing their increases on to us. So, but I think it's important that when we look at things like marina rates, capital projects, and certainly new projects that we have in the books, that, you know, our tax rates, we raised them quite heftily, in my opinion, last year. And we're looking at doing the same thing, I would think, this year. And at some point in time, it's got to give. Like, you can't just keep going. Clive, I heard a number one time, and this may be a little bit off topic, but years ago, we looked at raising our rates about 4% annually. And I think the calculation of that time is that your taxes would double in about 12 years. Now, I may be wrong with that, but that's beyond my scope of math. So that would be a number I'd like to know at about a 5% increase.
I think from Math 101, I learned the rule of 72. So if we take that percent divided into 72, that's when the numbers double. But I'll look, I'll do that.
I don't, it's just a question, because, you know, I think it's relevant as we start talking about budget and increasing what we're going to do. I think we have to really be realistic in where we go and what we do with all of these things. And I know we're in a transition on how we're doing it, but I think, you know, $52 a year doesn't sound like a lot, but when you start adding it to everything else, and of course, then the way we advertise it, and this is the challenge for our new communications guy, is, you know, we say we raise the rates 5%, but if you do the math, they went up about 8%. And that's because we don't calculate all these user fees in. Well, to me, you're still paying. I mean, it's a bit of a, you know, I know why we do it the way we do and how we do it, but, you know, the numbers don't add up, and they're climbing a lot. And it's, you know, I just don't want to get ourselves into a position where we're putting people into really bad positions. And this $52, I don't think we have much choice on, but I think we need to really look at some of the other things that we do. So that's my rant for the day.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions on that? So this is for the first reading. All in favor?
I'll second.
Any questions on second? All in favor?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? All right, and that the Comox Refuge Collection Amendment Bylaw 1985 be given first reading.
Second.
Questions? All in favor? And for second reading?
Second.
Questions? All in favor? And for third reading?
Second.
All in favor? All right, thank you. So at this point, you're going to talk about marina rates, and I'm going to recuse myself. So Councillor Swift is the acting mayor this month, so she will take my place. You're just going to stay there, Maureen? Yeah, okay.
We're looking at the Comox Municipal Marina Fees and Regulations Bylaw number 1993 to be given first reading.
Second.
Okay, for discussion? Councillor Bissinger?
Thank you. I think like Councillor Grant was saying, I think we've voted increases for at least once or twice before on the marina rates. And I remember once my name appeared in the newspaper as a hater of marina goers. So I guess I'll try to redeem myself here a little bit. But I guess my question is like one thing that was mentioned through a lot of letters was just, you know, we're increasing the rates, but we're, you know, the users aren't seeing a lot of return in terms of like improvements to the actual marina. So would staff be able to give us an update of what's actually been done other than, you know, the boat launch improvements that are planned? As well, like, is the 5% set in stone? Like, could we meet halfway and do a 2.5% increase? Would that alleviate concerns?
So we are looking at likely having to make a fairly significant capital infusion into the marina over the next couple of years. So in this year's capital and special projects budget, we're looking at doing the assessment on the marina, which will hopefully leave us with the document that tells us how much it's going to cost to replace the infrastructure there. We have about $600,000 in the marina reserve. So when myself and the CFO were looking at this, we both believe that there is a larger increase that's going to be required in order to fund replacement of the marina. We did not want to come with that level of increase now because we don't have the data to back it up. And if we came and asked for a 15% increase, council would say, what are you spending on? We said, well, we don't know yet. So we kept the number lower. I would say you can go to a lower number. However, that will likely mean a larger increase later. However, when we do come for that larger increase, it will be tied to asset-specific data on what that's going to cost. The other item, if we decrease that amount, we're either going to have to decrease the amount we're putting into reserves, or we're going to decrease the amount that we're transferring into general revenue, which means we'll probably have to make that up through general taxation. So right now, in 2022, I believe we're looking to put $100,000 into the asset reserve, and then about $100,000 would come into general revenue. So it's up to council if you want to change that amount, but those are the calculations we'll have to do on our end.
Councillor Minions?
Yeah, just a quick question. When we look at some of the larger expenditures that's coming to the marina, can we have them broken out where it really is like the boat users versus something like repairs to the boardwalk, which really are community centered? Because to me, you know, anything that's happening down there that really focuses on the boat ramp and those things really should be taxed to the users of the boat, you know, moorage. But it'd be nice to see where it's separated, where it's kind of general users of the park as well. So I'm just curious if those would be broken out, or it would just be marina development as one total.
Yeah, no, we can keep track of that moving forward. And I do believe that we do have a fairly decent breakdown right now, especially because most of the work that's being done there are capital projects, which have their own unique GLs. Where you're going to run into an issue in separating out all of the cost is when we get into staff time, you know, staff coming down and doing work and going across. But as far as the capital projects go, yes, we can, and we do separate out those costs.
Okay, yeah, I think the increases are unfortunate, but knowing that it's going to be coming down the road, I would rather see a normalized 4 or 5% versus having a 10 or 20% that people aren't expecting. So with what we know now, if the user fees for the general use of marina are taken out of that, I think that we need to increase it with the cost of managing that.
One thing, and I'll repeat this for the benefit of the mayor when he's back in here, but one thing that we're really looking at trying to struggle for what it means is what does inflation mean? You know, a year ago, I would have told you if you do a 2% tax increase, you haven't increased anything, we've kept the same, right? And anything below 2 is a tax cut. With inflation the way it is and where it's popping up where it is, what does that mean? What can I tell you is a hold the line? And I don't know, I don't think anybody knows what that number is right now. So that's the other thing that we are struggling with through all of our budget projections is what does inflation actually mean for our bottom lines?
Yeah.
Councillor Grant?
Oh, sorry. I think that a 5% increase is fair. And I think you're right. You want to normalize it. I think that you could probably throw several $1 million at that marina just from what I know and not really see a lot of change, but just get it a little more up to snuff than it is. I think Jordan brings up a really good point with inflation. You know, I heard today that our inflation rate is 4.77%. Historically, a 1.5 is something you can live with. It's not good, but you can live with it. So we are well above that. And so when you start trying to project, like I guess what Jordan told me today was, you know, what we used to think a 2% increase was hold the line, that might be 5% now, right? And so when we're looking at these things, and of course, when we own assets, we have an obligation to look after them too. So, I mean, it just becomes that. And so I think 5% is fair for this year, but I think that we could be looking at something significantly larger as we move along, just from what I know about needs to be done down there. So I'm in favor of what we're doing here.
Any further discussion? I guess I'm also in favor of this because I'd like to normalize the increases. I guess I'm also fearful of costs escalating, especially we're going to probably have some demand with supply chain interruptions and everything, and we don't know what's going to happen with prices as it keep going forward. But I would like to be able to point at something that we've done at Marina for the boaters, because every year they're upset when we do this, and we tell them we're doing things, but I'm not sure I can point at anything that we've actually done there. I'm sure there are things, I just am not aware of them. So maybe we could have that information come to us at some point.
Yeah, actually, I shared an email with, there seems to be like a boaters association type of group forming. It's not a formal one, but definitely an association, or definitely a group of like-minded individuals who have a network of communication down there. And so we've been releasing some information to them on what we're doing, what we're planning to do. And it's gone over fairly well, and we're going to continue to do that. And I agree, it's probably going to be not 2022, but 2023 when they actually see a lot of the changes being made. But they are aware of the work that we've done for the risk assessment down there, that we've got money in the capital and special projects budget for the assessment. We're looking at doing security cameras. They may already be up and running, which they were thankful for. So just the increased communication, I think, is going a long way to letting them know that we are aware of the condition that the marina is in, and we're taking active steps to fix it.
Councillor Bissinger.
Sure, thank you. And I appreciate you summarizing that, Jordan. I think it'd be great to even send it out to all the users down there once they do get their notice for renewal of their slip. But I guess a question too for the Marine Services building, if we are going ahead with that, can you remind me if there's showers going in there? Because I know one of the big discrepancies between the two, the private and the public marina, were access to showers. So that'd be kind of nice to give that feature to users down there.
Off the top of my head, I do not believe that we had included showers in the Marine Services building. And I think when we went through the redesign with council, we actually decreased the size of the bathrooms. So that may be something that we can still do and make changes. The Marine Services building still needs to come back to council for your final approval. The reason that's been delayed is that we've put in for another grant with the federal government, and we were supposed to have heard back on that grant a while ago, and we still have not. So I'm going to take a look into see where we are on that, and then what the timeline is going to be. And at that time, we can have discussions as well, because there may be, if we're not successful in that grant, we were looking at coming to council to say that there was going to be a $600,000 contribution required from the municipality to construct the building, and the question would be coming to you as to whether or not you want to make that investment.
Well, it sounds like we have some projects for Matt as the communications fellow with with voters as well as council. So
I knew
maybe
we brought him to the right
yeah, maybe we could be included when you send out one of those notices to the stakeholders. That would be great. Okay, any further discussion? Okay. Okay, so this is for first reading. All in favor? Okay.
Second.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay,
Second.
any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
the water parcel tax, Comox sanitary sewer and water parcel tax bylaw 1994.
Second.
Questions on that? All in favor? And second reading,
Move.
Second.
any questions? All in favor? Third,
Second.
all in favor? Great, thank you. And the capital and special projects budget that the council approves for expenditure of the capital and special projects in Schedule A of this report and their inclusion in the 2022-26 draft financial plan.
So I don't think I'm prepared to, I prefer not to vote on this tonight. I think I still have a lot of questions on what we're doing and how we're going to do that.
I was just going to say our chief financial officer has prepared a short update based on some of the questions that council had asked in that last meeting. If Clive wants to take the podium and council will indulge us.
And it's 5 to 6. Nothing. Don't worry about it. So he's gonna. Well, if you don't get him in, right?
Yeah.
There's a flaw in the system. If we only knew somebody that could change it. Yeah, and if you're not right on it.
Yeah, I can do both. Don't worry. Just if I'm distracted, I'm just consider that I'm thinking of a good answer for you.
We could take a 5-minute recess if you want.
It's ready to go. It should be clicked in.
You know how many times I said that today? And it wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is Jordan, I'll just go through it quickly and jump in. And this is a high level projection of your 2022 budget. So we didn't have to. Yeah, excellent. We worked on the capital special projects, and as well as the operating budget was updated. So we're able to give you a fairly close approximation of what 2020 preliminary budget looks like. There's a couple talking points we want to get down to. Looking at the revenues, how the asset management speaks into the financial plan. And this is the wave of costs that are coming for refurbishment and replacement of our infrastructure. And what is the stable dollars and how much we have to contribute to that replacement and refurbishment of our infrastructure. And finally, the reserves, and then just sort of a recap again as to what is required for this asset management project we've been working on for the last few years. That is now speaking to us about what's coming as costs. So we can go to the next slide. So in a high level, 2022 projection, $31 million is what we're looking at in our revenues. And it just, if we look at core expenses, again, those are the recurring operating costs that occur every year. They're payroll, materials and supplies, contracted services. Principal repayments, we don't have any general debt, but we have some local area service that contribute to debt for their lift stations and so forth. Most of that debt expires within 2 years. So even there, the local area services were free of debt, but there is no general municipal debt. Special projects are actually operating expenses. These are your feasibility studies and the one-off maintenance, very expensive maintenance projects. And then we're into capital expenditures, which we looked at earlier with our preliminary capital projects. And that leaves us a shortfall of $4.2 million that has to come from some, and that's usually the reserves that we draw down on, but we just put that as the deficit. We need to draw on our reserves to contribute to those capital projects. Let's go to the next slide then. We're going to go through this kind of slowly and we'll get down into the deficit a little bit later, but the revenues come from developer contribution. Oh, I see this is an older presentation. I'm sorry about that, Jordan. I somehow got the wrong slideshow in there, but I think we can make this work. Apologies for that. Developer cost charges. Developer contribution is our drawdown on development cost charges. So it's not like we're going out and getting that money this year. It's money we've collected over many years, and it's sitting in a deferred revenue state. We just draw it down because of the capital project. So that's actually tied to the capital spending. Property taxes is the largest source of our revenue, 12.9 million. Sale of services, which includes the marina and our water and sewer, $10 million. And the government transfers, there are some steady grants that we receive every year, but the majority of that is related to capital projects. We've applied for grants and we're receiving grant revenue for those capital projects. And investment income. Right now, we are looking at we're doing well on our investment income for 2021. We'll probably bring in $625,000 in revenue there. But that's sort of the makeup of our $31 million of 2022 revenues. Next slide. Jordan, I don't know if you want me to switch that to the other slide presentation, but I made a mistake. Yeah, I do. This is how we're doing. Yeah.
Good timing.
Yes, it's right on the button. Yes. Perfect timing. Yeah.
Issue payments.
Yeah.
Back to revenue. Back to revenue. It just sort of has a little bit better the titles as opposed to our accounting terms, more generic language. So yeah, just a picture of the $31 million where it comes from. And we'll go on to the next slide. Do I have a I guess you're doing it for me. Okay, so property tax revenue, $12.9 million comes into property taxes. We just sort of put a little bit of a chart there. Jordan, if you want to speak into anything on that general taxation, 9.9 million of general taxation, it just shows that high percentage of our money comes from residential. Very low light industrial, less than 1%, utilities, 1%, business class, 16% of our tax revenue comes from business versus 82% from residential. Just to give a snapshot, heavily reliant on residential property taxes. We have the benefit of Department of National Defense in the federal buildings, which brings $1.8 million in. That's separate to the general taxation.
But can you refresh my memory on what the difference between light industrial and
right? Multipliers for light industrials are, I'm going to say 3. I'm going to go double check that for you, but about three times. Businesses, we were closing on 3.8. I think businesses, we're a multiple of about 3.8 to 1 for businesses. I will need to double check that. I don't have that at my fingertips. Yeah. So yes, big bang for the back for light industrial and businesses may move into town for new construction. So that's one slide, and we'll move on to the next.
Clive?
Yeah.
I see the D and D, that's the PILT that we.
Yes. so
What is Canada Post?
Canada Post is a federal building, also pays by PILT. So the difference between the PILT and from the rest of general taxation is I read them a letter, calculate the taxes just as if we're going to send them a tax notice, but because they're another level of government, we can't send them a tax notice. So I send them a letter asking for money, and it equals what they would have got if we sent them a tax notice.
Is that the My Tech Guy building? That's
Yeah,
Canada
my
Post?
tech building right
Yeah.
there,
Oh,
federal
okay.
government building.
Oh, okay.
The next large source of revenue is our sale of services. And this is just an idea of where the money is coming from. The Comox Marina we were discussing is 4% of the 10 million. Development, these are the fees that Marvin is collecting as people apply for subdivisions and various forms of permits. Sewer fees, water fees, those are collected and basically just paying the regional district. They charge us for those. So the big items we're collecting and those rates you saw increase are just a flow through from the regional district to us. We raise the rates and we pay the expenses with those revenues.
Are you okay with questions?
Sure, please. That's probably the
Yeah.
best way.
Being mindful of me recusing myself from the marina, and I don't want to talk about any rates that we increased, but the monies that is collected, is it going into a reserve? Is it partial into a reserve? Is
Yeah.
it going into general revenue? I mean,
In the past, you're right. Yeah, in the past, there was a contribution to reserves and there was also a contribution to general revenue. It was not set up like a fund, like the water or sewer fund. So having a marina contribute to the general revenue as well as to its own reserve. But we've increased the portion that has gone to its own reserve considerably. And we have also in the past, I don't think we counted all the overhead costs that we're now including. And so that's pretty well minimized what's going into general revenue. So pretty well all of it now is going to a reserve. Yeah.
Ask a really quick
Councilor Main.
question. On the development 1%, like roughly 100,000, would that
Yeah.
just be for like individual DVPs that come in?
Yes.
That's nowhere near what DCCs would
Permits.
include.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Individual
DCCs are
permits.
different. When we collect the DCCs, they don't get the revenue. The DCCs go straight into restricted revenue or deferred revenue accounts.
Right.
So this is just the permits and applications.
Seemed low,
DVPs.
but if it's, just
Yeah.
individual development.
That's
permits.
right. Solid waste is the garbage, organics, and so forth. Again, those costs are basically passed, we're recovering the cost of the regional district. The MTER is charging us for solid waste and the tipping fees from the regional district. Okay. And then Gord was here, he would want me to say that 30% of the revenues belong to the Comox Fire Protection Improvement District. 30% of that operation, the assets are owned by the Comox Fire Protection Improvement District, so they share roughly 30% of the costs and 30% of the revenue. Okay. So here's a snapshot from an asset management lens. Reserves are about $16 million. We have $250 million today is the replacement value of our assets out there. So from the water infrastructures, 50 million, and sewer infrastructure is about the same, I think $40 million. To roads, $60 million, to storms, $40 million. And altogether, that replacement cost of our infrastructure is $250 million. And we've been working on our asset management program to draw that out and look at the community service life of our assets and when they need to be replaced. And that's where really we're going to with this presentation, is we're bringing those costs to you now and sort of showing you definitely over the next 30 years, we're plotting when most assets have to be replaced. We're about 50%. Sorry, I'm breathing through my mask and I'm having a hard time getting enough oxygen. Can I take it off for this presentation? Thanks. That would be a lot easier. Thanks. Oh,
Is he
the breath.
wearing a mask? I thought we got him.
Yeah, so we're about 50% of the way through. We've consumed our assets about 50%. If we look at all the roads and storms and everything, we're through 50% of their life. So we do have to have a horizon of replacing them. Some of them are coming up sooner than others, but there's a timeline showing over the next 30 years which assets have to be replaced. But under 5% have actually clearly passed their life, such as Town Hall building, a few other them. But that's sort of a state of our assets right now. Looking at that wave of cost coming to us, averaging it, it's about a $4 to $6 million infrastructure renewal and replacement capital expenditure that we require. Most of that 4 million right now, about 4 million. If we average it to 5 million, about $4 million of that is in the general fund, roads, storm, and just over $500,000 a year in the water fund and sewer fund. We need to review those assets.
So a couple of questions if I could. Is that okay? So we are debt free, and I recall, you know, back on council in those days, really pushing towards getting debt free because that was going to be a good thing. How important is it that we be debt free? Like sometimes it's really nice to be debt free, but it's not prudent. You know, sometimes you could do a lot better if you had some debt to move. So that's question number one. Question number two is, and it's leading into when we get a little further down here, but how do we determine what the cost of, like, let's say we put $1 million sidewalk in. How do we determine what the cost of that's going to be and how long do they last? 30, 40, 50 years? Like, let's say 50 years. So how do we know, how do we determine what that's worth in the future and how much we have to put aside in order to maintain that and then replace it when the time comes?
So I go to Alex Bissinger and she'll pull up engineering news reporting and give me the tables. And that's all it is the tables.
Just on table.
We have engineering tables that will, sorry? Yes. So Corey Seville, who helped us with the asset management, also provided us those tables. So we look at all the assets when they were put into stage, and we use these indexes to determine. We look at our community service life for us. How long do we think this asset will last? That's really important. We started this in 2018. We looked at best practices, community life, and we had this wave, a tsunami of cost about to descend on us. And then Corey went through and talked to all the departments and looked at, well, really, what is the community service like? What is our expectations? And that pushed that wave and flattened the curve over many years. But the actual values of replacement costs that we're looking at 250,000 is coming from the engineering tables.
Okay. 250 million.
250 million is our cost now to replace.
Zeros. So, okay, because I remember seeing an engineering report years ago, and it said that, like, engineers, no offense to engineers, but they'd say a road would last 20 to 25 years. Well, we don't even look at them till they're 40.
We did the same. We've done that.
And so we've done that.
We have actually, first you have to go and put in how long will that infrastructure will last. And secondly, then we look at the A&R tables and bring that in. So we have said on a number of buildings, not 40 years, but plus roads instead of this number of years, plus. So we've really made it personal. And that was done in 2021, where we really itemized our community service life is what we call them.
So that brought down our yearly, the estimated required contribution started at 8 million.
Yes.
And through that process, it's down to 4 to 6.
Yeah. So the slides I showed you in 2018, that was 7.5 to 8 million. Now we're down to 4 to 6 million.
So I guess where I'm trying to go with this is that, like, if we put a sidewalk, and I'm just using sidewalks as an example, it could be anything, but if you put a sidewalk in for $1 million and then you go, we don't have to use cement on the road, like we don't have to do anything with that, but there actually is a cost as we go forward. We do have to keep putting aside for that replacement and whatever minor repairs would have to be done. So it's not free, even if you get grant money, I guess is my point.
Grant money is, everything is factored into this. So what we're looking at is there will be, all of our assets are on a continuum. So we look at all the assets that have to be replaced in 2021 in the asset management, and it lists them individually based on the tables we have. So that sidewalk is going to come up for replacement out in year 50 or 70. And at that point, that will be a cost. So every sidewalk, every section of the sidewalk is in the table. But I don't have the tables.
Fair enough.
Everything is tagged, and their segments are tagged as to when they need to be replaced. The sidewalks, I think we pushed them out 75 years or something.
Yeah.
So they're quite long time assets. We're not looking to recover that in this $4 to $6 million for the next averaging for the next 5 years. It's not those sidewalks that you might be speaking of. It will come in and speak to future costs.
And then I guess my first question was, how prudent is it to be debt free? Like, should we maybe be borrowing something like money's really cheap right now, even though it's gone up a bit?
You look at who is benefiting from the project, and if it's a future generation that's benefiting, there's definitely a case for using borrowed money. It's all about a timing of when the expense occurs and who is benefiting from it. So right now we come up debt free. It's great, but as you go out 20-year planning, there could be case or using debt right now. And it's maybe a trade-off between what revenues you can receive versus what should go onto debt. Those conversations, Jordan, will be those with the council.
Okay.
Right now, we don't have a plan for debt.
Councillor Minions, that's a question.
Yep, go ahead.
Councillor Farrell. So the estimated required contribution of the 4 to 6 is the 4.22 we're looking at just for 2021 based on the $13 million spend.
Correct. Yes.
So
Sorry,
you
no,
mentioned,
Okay, go ahead.
Actually,
Just go clarify.
those numbers are close to each other, but that's different. So the spending that's showing the $4.22 million deficit has new spends in it as well. And it's really important to note that this 4 to 6 million is what it costs to maintain what we have. And what the original budget was showing, it also showed numbers of new things that we were adding. Maybe Clive, if you want to skip to the next.
so would that be
slide.
like saying this year we're saying the capital expenditures are 13 million and the 4 to 6 is like the normalized average we're looking at per year, but
Correct.
next year happens to be the spiked year?
Yes and no. So yes to part of it, that there is a spike a bit this year. Part of the 13 million is covered off in grants, which is not under the 4 to 6, and part of the 13 million is covered under this 4 to 6, but not all of it. Clive, can you go? So this is actually, we'll just go through 2 more slides and it'll be easier to answer your question, if that's okay.
And so then I have a question just on the asset management. So, in September, we had an issue where one of our sewer manholes cracked and led into a storm manhole that had a crack that unfortunately made its way down to Brooklyn Creek. So there's an old system. What are we doing for our asset management with those things that have, our failing infrastructure directly relates to environmental concerns? Are we going in, are we just looking, okay, there's a number, we're going to look at that in 10 years? Or are we doing something a little more robust now that we're scoping these things out, checking them for cracks, especially where they go into sensitive areas where they could lead to problems? Are we doing any of that, CIO, with Public Works?
Yeah, so we are trying to be cognizant of where it's the risk of failure, right? So, a piece of infrastructure that's going to fail or a non-important piece of infrastructure that fails doesn't get the type of attention that higher risk piece of infrastructure that fails as well, or that does. The other part of it too is that we're mostly though focused on trying to do the scoping exercises when we're going to be replacing connecting infrastructure. So that's been the major drive of what we're trying to do, is to make sure that when we're going to replace one piece of infrastructure, we're investigating all the connecting pieces of infrastructure so it can all be replaced at one time. That's been the main focus of what we're doing.
Yeah. Remember, this is asset management, like guiding where on the horizon are we going, and that's what helps us set those revenues we need for anticipated costs coming. But in the trenches, in the 5 years, we're also dealing with the emergencies and have to do what we have to do, and that will speak into the asset management program. The asset management program isn't fixed every year; new data gets put into it, so those numbers are fluctuating based on the emergency fixes we have to do. So think of this as sort of gives us a 30-year horizon.
Okay, thank you. And you wanted, Councillor Bissell?
Yeah, just about talking about emergencies and just from what we're seeing everywhere else, like on the mainland at the moment, let's say there was some bad flooding and we had like Balmoral washout at Brooklyn Creek, and we had other emergencies like slope stability issues and, sidewalks or roads that are supposed to last 40 years actually totally get washed out from the subbase or whatever. Like if we had to fix those, like how much money can we borrow?
Yeah.
Or would we sort of be like left hanging to dry, or just the federal government kick in? Like how does, I know it's really not related to this, but I'm just curious, like how that all functions.
I think initially we go, if there's a grant, if there's a wipeout, if there's an emergency, we'll try to recover from another level of government. We do have a reserves cushion, but they are concerned. They are based on very minimal level, based on an asset management replacement program. Not a lot of room for new capital, that's for sure. And insurance, really, we're not going to recover on insurance for things like roads or pipes and underground infrastructure. We have building insurance and equipment insurance, but when it comes to that other type of infrastructure, we're protected for environmental disasters and penalties that come out, but not to replace the pipe that way. So other levels of funding using the reserves timing of when projects happen, stretch it out a little bit, give us time to normalize rates, recoveries like taxes, to be able to rebuild those reserves. So we're really taking care of a big house and all the pipes that go with this house, just like we would do at home.
The provincial government, if we get into an emergency like that, the provincial government will pay significant amounts of money to help us repair and rebuild our infrastructure. On major issues like that, they cover, I believe, 80%. So it would still be a hefty bill for us. But having said that, if the infrastructure that washes out is more than 20% used and you get 80% of the refund cost, you actually can come out ahead in those situations. Not that we'd ever want to wish that on our community, but
and we wouldn't have the resources maybe to do the normal capital projects in the replacement plan if we're doing, where all our resources are specified there. And then, of course, you look at places like Oak Bay, where I came from, and you see that they have natural speed bumps because they haven't done their roads. So hopefully we never get to that. But those are the worst case scenarios. Yeah, you have to have provisions for that. So, yeah. So this slide is another way of looking at it. And we take our total revenue and we remove the portions that are related to capital. So government grants, we take out 4.3 million because it's related to capital projects. We take out those development DCC monies that we're drawing down from our restricted revenues, take that out, and we have our own revenue, our real revenue of $23 million. That's our recurring revenue that we can count on. That's our stable dollars. And look at core debt, core and the little bit of debt servicing we have. 21 million is our expenses. So, and I'm gonna add to the, sorry, I just want to get you down to the $4.2 million deficit. And so we have 23 million of our own revenue. And then we look at what we're doing for our total expenditures, and we see that there's a deficit that has to come from somewhere. So that's just that sort of one way of looking at the numbers.
Yeah, and this
You have
so
a
this
couple
comes
ways.
out to the same, but it strips it down to say, okay, well, what are the unique things that are coming in this year, and what can we depend on year to year? And Clive, if you want to jump to the next slide, I think this will answer your question the best, Councillor Minion. So right now we're bringing in about $24 million in revenue with a $21 million operating expense. That leaves us with a surplus of, I'm just going to round and use round numbers as I go through this. That leaves us with a surplus of around $3 million. So in one of the last slides, we said we believe that we need about $4 to $6 million a year in order to cover off and repair our assets long term. So we believe that we're going to need somewhere between $1 to $2 to $3 million in additional revenue to cover off our assets. So that's where staff needs to go and figure out what that number is actually going to be. Now, this is only to pay for what we already have. This doesn't cover anything new. And if you take a look at your capital and special projects budgets, there are a number of new spends. Your special projects would not be covered under that 3 million, and that's where these things start to add up. We are not at the point staff-wise, and you are getting close, where we can tell you, okay, this is what the number is between that 4 to 6. And once we do, and we talked about this a little bit last year, my recommendation to council will be that we start off with that as the first expense as we build our budgets. You know, it's no different than being a homeowner. The first thing you have to do is pay your mortgage. The first thing we have to do is pay for our capital that we already have. From there, you would go into setting your operational budgets. And then from whatever's left over, you would know what you have for new projects or special projects or new initiatives. So that's my suggestion on how we're going, of how we can be doing budgeting in the future to make sure that we're doing it sustainably. But this gives you a window or an idea of where we are fiscally. After we pay our operating expenses, we have about $3 million in revenue. We need to pay probably about $4, maybe $5 million into our capital. So we need to raise at least $1 million more in revenue per year just to pay for our capital. And then after that, what does council want to do to move the community in a new direction? That's where we're going to need additional funding, or council's going to have to look at decreasing services in areas in order to get our operating costs down, or saying that we're not going to replace certain pieces of capital so that capital cost comes down. So that's the direction that we're heading. One of the positive notes on this is, Clive, I think we calculated that if we were simply to bring the Comox residential tax rate up from where it is to match Courtney's, that brings in an additional $2 million of revenue. And that might be enough to cover off our capital costs and leave money for council to give direction on where the community would like to head. But that's the hard work that needs to be done over the next year, maybe 2 years, so that that type of budgeting can be done correctly. And this was really a long way to get to the answer to the question that you asked us in the last meeting, which is, can we afford to do what we're doing right now? And the answer is no. We don't believe that we can afford to do what we're doing right now. We need to either increase revenue or decrease our operating expenses.
Councillor Grant.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask a question that I think I already know the answer to, but I'll ask it anyway. So if we took some of these projects and slid them out a year, I'm going to assume that doesn't have a huge effect on this.
We're looking at it, we do a medium-term financial plan, which is 5 years. So when I'm looking at it, although yes, council looks at 1 year, I'm doing my numbers on 5 years.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the spend on 5 years. The asset management speaks into it for 30 years. So asset management gives me that horizon figure. Then I look at the 5 years. So as we're crunching numbers, I keep looking at the end point at the end of 5 years. What do I have in the accumulated surplus? What are my reserves at? That's the number I keep going to and looking at. So when you make decisions to move something to 2023, 22, I just keep going to that end number. How are we going to do in the end of 5 years? Because we sort of normalize things for tax rate increases, but it is important to look at year one. Obviously, that's the year that's right in front of you, and how much you're going to draw down on the reserves. We don't want to have a high spend capital spend in year one, and then for that to repeat again without me knowing about it in year 3, 4, and 5. So I'm sort of normalizing and averaging a position for 5 years. But we are seeing that the historically, this kind of number, that was fine. You did your roads with a 2.8 million.
Yeah.
You did all your capital within that number. But now we've introduced more formal planning with asset management, and we realize that we are 50% through the use of the assets, and we've got to start thinking about refurbishment and renewals. This is adding a whole new dimension to our budgeting process.
Yeah.
And these, sorry, if I can just jump into your question, Councillor Grant. This is where we're going to start to have the discussion again with Corey, hopefully in December, if not early into the new year, because moving one project out a year doesn't bring a lot of benefit. If you look at, let's say we have $1 million road that we had anticipated was going to be replaced in 20 years. That means the road costs about $50,000 a year to have. If you delay that by a year, it only changes that road to $47,000. So you've saved $3,000 in taxes that year. Now, when you start to do that across $250 million worth of assets, it can start to add up. But simply pushing one project out a year, let's say you have a $1 million project, you want to push it out a year, will that result in a couple % decrease in tax? No, it's only going to save you about $3,000 that year. And that's, as we start to normalize and average it, you're not going to be able to balance your budget off of simply moving one capital project. If you look at the entire quality of assets across the 250 million, you can make a real impact. But the really big impacts that are going to happen to your budget, the really big impacts that are going to happen or allow you to affect tax rates are new infrastructure, new spending, new programs, or service reductions alternatively.
Okay, so I guess all the questions that I've been asking leading up, and then if you throw inflation onto that number at the whopping percent that we're going, that number is just going to get worse. It's not going to get better. And the other thing on top of that happens is we've been really lucky since COVID hit, that we've gotten a lot of 100% grants or very big percentage grants. Generally, a grant, you get a third. So a third provincial, a third federal, and a third from us, even though we only get 8% of the money. So I look, as we normalize our economy, that those grants are going to go back to that kind of level. And I'm going to suspect there won't be a lot of them in the future. So I think we got to kind of think about that too. But the other thing that I'm hearing you say here, I think, is that the only real impact we can have is on new spending or new projects. Could we get a list of what the new projects are? And I guess I would try and challenge everybody to have a look through those lists and see which ones are really important to you and which ones aren't. Because I know, my question about doubling the taxes and 5% and all that, you can't just keep nailing people for 5% taxes every year. That's just not going to fly. You're going to tax people right out of their houses if you're not careful. So I think that the day of reckoning is going to come here pretty soon, where we have to really look at what we're going to do for new projects. And if you look at the Marine Services building, it's a good example, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying don't do it, but you know, if it's $600,000 over budget, and then you have to put an asset management plan onto that, and then you have to repair it and maintain it and keep it up, that might be something we have to look at and go, maybe that's not good value. And so, you know, and that's just an example I'm using, but, and I brought up the sidewalk one for the same issue is, you know, is that good expenditure of money, knowing where this is all going? So if we could get a list of what the new projects are, then we could have a hard look at what we're.
Is this list that you gave us at the strategic planning, this is the list that we are looking at for the coming year
Yes.
and the next?
But
one.
it
So-
doesn't
so we do have-
really specify the new projects. Like they're all in there, but it's hard to, like, I just like a list. of that.
We typically run over 90% of replacement refurbishment, very little new projects, but this could be highlighted.
Yeah, sorry. So
and
you're
do that.
looking basically the schedules that we have, but instead have it broken down into what is a repair or replacement, and then what is something that's additional or a
That's
study or
exactly
special
what I meant
project.
to say, yeah.
Yeah,
that's
we can provide that for council.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilor Minns?
Yeah, it's great to see these numbers again and kind of get the asset management concept in our mind, because it's just something we've been probably talking about implementing for the last 2 or 3 years. I think the challenge, I like Ken's idea of having the special projects brought out and then rediscussing those, because when we look at Schedule A through D, we get the finance presentation tonight. It seems like it would be a challenge to pass all these without at least understanding if we are looking at an annual deficit of what could be $2 to $3 million, just understanding the scenario of exactly what that looks like if we do decide to have to tax that on primarily property taxes, because, you know, if you do really quick math on that, that's like a 30% increase. So, and I'm sure that would obviously not be something that would be voted for, but I think at this point, looking at Schedule A through D, it would be good to find out what is really just the 90% of redoing infrastructure and what is new projects, because I couldn't vote for all A through D, even talking about them or knowing them, without really understanding if we are looking at 2 to 2.5 million for the level of service and keeping property taxes, like what the result is would actually probably be not something we would vote for. So I just would like a little more information, and getting this presentation would be helpful, and then the list of plans. But will we, before we would look at doing Schedule A through G, get some sort of, you know, this is what the scenario of where this money will come from in 2022. So it's hard to pass $13.4 million of capital projects without really understanding what our plan is for paying for it. So every information piece that comes to us is really helpful, but, you know, I would hate to pass that much without understanding what our options are for actually paying for that first.
Yeah, and then there's no issues with that. This budget creation is a process. So council, you'd adopted a new budget process. So in your policy, which you can always amend, but this schedule isn't on track to be passed until I think mid or late January. So there's lots of time for these types of discussions. And the other thing to remember too is, because we're planning to do that sort of capital smoothing, just because there's a large capital spike in 1 year doesn't necessarily mean that's a dangerous or scary thing. So, you know, right now, this is kind of what our asset projections look like, with with them dipping down over 22. 23 is going to be a big year, as we have to do all the work in conjunction with conveyance projects going through, and things slow down and kind of allow reserves to be replenished a little bit more. So what we can do is exactly what council's asked for, is to separate out what are the new spends versus what are the repair and replacements, because anything that's being repaired or replaced comes out of that $4 million that needs to be set aside anyway. It's the new spending or the new additions that we need to find additional revenue in order to pay for.
Can I just ask, like, that reserves chart pretty much looks like it's balanced out around the 20 million from 2020 to 2026. It might be down slightly.
Yeah, this is our current 5-year plan, 2022 through 2026. That's the preliminary. And you saw that heavy 13 million spend in the early years, some heavy spend in the year 2023, and then it sort of lightens out as it goes out the 5 years. But the concern is the asset management program speaks to us and says you should be looking out over a 20-year, 30-year horizon, probably moving towards the 5 million annual spend. And so if we brought in 5 million annual spend in 2024, 2025, 2026, which we don't have, well, we're a little bit, we're low, then that might see a little bit of a depletion there too. So again, asset management is that long range guiding principle. We have a 5-year range and then we look at the 1 year. So right currently, we're proposing a balanced 5-year plan, but.
So my
no
question
asset
that is,
management
what
can
is the
control.
tax rate assumed with that chart and model? Like what assumption are we making?
I have used the tax rate for the numbers here, and Jordan, actually 5% is what I.
5% every year?
So, yeah, no, not each year, in the first year. in the
And then
5-year
2
plan,
after
and then
that?
Drop 3.
5 and 3.
4, I think it was 5, 4, 3, 2, 3, 3.
Okay.
So I don't go below 3.
Okay, so this 5-year plan is assuming a 5, 4, 3, 3, 3, but not assuming an asset management plan
And
of 20 years.
yeah, and just basically the asset management plan is just speaking into normalizing it to where we're going to be out in 10 years. So we're not going to be seeing these spikes of 30% or anything like that. It's usually about $2,000 tax on a property in the town of Comox. And, we did the comparisons with Courtney, same house on McDonald border, take the same house, cross it over Ruby, that's across the border in Courtney. So same house, this is $2,300. It's a few $100 difference. And that few $100 difference makes up the $2 million. So I'm not going there right now or talking about that really, but it is just nice to know on your horizon that your taxes are in the provincial level pretty low. And in the region here, it's relatively low if you were to have same properties crossing the border. It's a few $100 discounted here.
Councilor Grant has.
So I guess the other thing, and it seems fairly doom and gloom at the moment, but I was at a conference one time and asset management was the thing, and there was probably 250 people in the room, and the lady said, what community has an asset management plan? Well, there was 3 of us that put our hand up. Nobody else was even, but this was the hot topic and everybody was trying to get into it. So I guess if there's any comfort, we're not alone and we're actually quite a bit ahead of most communities on this, but there's a day of reckoning coming for a lot of communities. I'm going to say almost all across Canada haven't even dreamed of asset management until just about a year ago. So really, we're in the pain part right now, but I think we're way ahead.
Yeah, I would agree, Council. There is a path forward here that doesn't involve a ton of pain. It doesn't involve a ton of service decreases. Ultimately, those are your decisions on what you're going to make. But as far as where we are in the process, we're ahead of most communities in our asset planning. As far as where we are in being able to fund these issues, we're ahead of most communities. I am aware of multiple communities that are getting into this and are having to go to their residents and saying 2 things. We are going to be increasing your taxes substantially, and we are going to be decreasing the services you receive substantially at the same time. And we are not in that scenario. There are some adjustments and there's certainly some tough decisions that are going to lie ahead of us, but what we have is manageable. I would say we are generally able to maintain the lifestyle we currently enjoy, which is a very positive thing and not something every community can say.
That's right. Okay, and you have more on your
I
slide.
think there's just a little bit more, just the takeaway. Town needs to increase our yearly capital contributions. This is as a result of the asset management plan speaking into it. Again, the long range speaking into our capital spending for renewals and replacements, $1.5 to $2.5 million. And we continue to refine the data that we are bringing to council. And the asset management, as Jordan has mentioned, will be coming back, I think, with Corey Seville's work in our infrastructure asset management program.
And Council, this report is the same as last year. This is going to continue to show up on your regular council meetings. You don't have to pass all of it, any of it, until you're comfortable. We have, we have at least a month and a half to go through. If you need more time, that's fine as well. But by continuing to put it on the agenda, it fosters the discussions, it brings out the questions, it allows us to come back with the information that you need. So, like I said, this will continue to be there until you're ready to pass it. There's no need for you to pass it today or even the next time you see it.
Okay, so we can just take it for information today. Okay. Now, Councilor Bissinger had a quick.
Sure, thanks. And it was basically just looking at Schedule A, and then Clive mentioned $1.5 million would basically save us from increasing taxes. So I'm looking at these roundabouts, and we're $1.5 million for 23-24 for those 2 years, so $3 million total. And I appreciate staff for sending the traffic study, and I had a look at it, and it basically just like reinforced the fact that I'm super against it. One thing being, all of the data was collected between 2007 and 2017, and it was up until September 2017, and the hospital opened up in October 2017. So in my mind, that is super flawed. So, and I know like we have money on there for the budget, and I'm not against, I talked to the CEO earlier today, and maybe we could have like a third party engineering firm, like validating the actual need for a roundabout in that area. I'm not saying I want to dismiss it entirely, because I think it is a great asset for the community. It's a great piece of infrastructure. I just don't know if that's the spot to do it. And then, you know, just biking over there earlier, it's like, cool, we'd have a roundabout, and then 50 meters later, you'd have the intersection anyway. So it doesn't really improve circulation if you have the red light at the intersection. So I'm still super torn about it. And I would like, I don't know if there's a motion that I can do to sort of have a bit more money spent towards the study of it without actually committing to the actual roundabout, if that's something that council would entertain, but just to kind of get things going on that, despite of all the other items in Schedule A. I guess it's just because it's a big ticket item, and I don't want to make the good or the bad decision on it without being comfortable with it.
And CIO's goes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate those concerns. So I've asked our engineering team, and Shelley specifically, to reach out to a third-party engineer already. So we are going to get somebody who wasn't involved in drafting the plan, who has knowledge of this and can give us an independent review of how it was done and the decision to be made. I agree, it's a major investment, and it is something that will be a major disruption and change of lives of almost everybody in Comox, and they will see it. So we're going to go and get that done. We'll bring the information back to council. I'll be sure to mention your concerns that you brought up specifically, and we'll find out what that independent person has to say, and we'll share it with council.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Minions.
Yeah, just a quick question, and actually came from Councilor Bissinger, but with the developments happening, like at 695 Aspen, the townhouses on Guthrie there, the development of some of the single family lots, will we see much of an increase in our, I know that there's obviously services that go with that, but some of it's towards recreation and things that'll just be fixed costs. Will we see any, is that included in
That is
our?
included, that 31 million includes, so we call it non-market activity, new construction. So that's factored into that formula when we do the taxes. So we have that little cushion, that gravy that comes every year because of that new construction, but it's already factored into this.
Okay. Do we use like the same number every year? Or do we use actual? So
I try to estimate based on the coming, what has happened in development. I think what's going to come as new non-market changes called on the assessments, and show that as 100,000 or 150,000 increase for next year's revenue. That's just going to be an additional. That's outside of your tax increase. It's just going to be additional revenue coming in, because tax increases, we're looking at taxing the same properties this year as last year to get that tax increase.
okay, so the boost is already
And so we get a
included in
boost, we get that gravy of money because of new construction and business, even better, because that's close to 4 to 1.
So to answer your question about the dense buildings that are construction, 695 Aspen will bring net revenue to the municipality. We haven't done these calculations, but I'm not convinced that the addition of single family residences will bring a net benefit or a net revenue to the municipality, because as we build for single family residences, we need to take on the cost of infrastructure attached to them. So there hasn't been analysis done in Comox specifically, but there is growing literature out there that large lot single family consumes more resources than they pay into. When we're looking at residential infill, it is probably not adding a lot to our net revenue as well, simply because the amount of staff time we have to add to deal with it and the additional revenue you get in from the small infill. We are going through processes to try and identify people who have additional suites. So that is going to bring in some money, but even then we're talking about smaller amounts. But projects like 695 Aspen bring in a sizable chunk of net revenue to the municipality.
Right, oh, Councilor Grant.
And I think what, on the one slide that you showed, Clive, with the light industrial, I think it really shows the need to get our airport lands up to speed. We are completely heavily burdened on residential, and we get away with it just because we are allowed to collect help. But man, if the base ever decided to move or something, we'd be in a world of hurt. But if we could get our light industrial class, and the only land we really have is out at the airport, I think that increases our revenue quite handily. So, that whole area is a big deal to us if we can get it moving.
Okay, thank you. Do you just want a motion of receipt of this information, or are you're okay with,
Hey, you can just move on if you don't want to.
yeah,
pass the
yeah,
motion as
okay, good. Well, that was a good, robust discussion. Thank you. And, yeah, so we'll just move on to reports from members of council. And that would be Councillor McGowan, and then we'll go around the clock.
I attended a modernizing forestry policy or forest policy engagement for the West Coast session. I've been attending the BC Housing conference for the last few days, and there's lots of interesting modules, and I should be able to keep watching them because I think they're all recorded, and there's like 6 of them going on at once. So gonna continue watching those, hopefully bring some new info or ideas or possible partnerships. I attended an Elders Take Action gathering, talking about housing issues for elderly people in the valley, obviously a growing issue. And yeah, all of my boards are next week.
Great, thanks, Councillor Swift.
Thank you. Ken and I were trying to remember whether we'd already reported out on this, but I think the date indicates that, no, we hadn't. So this is the Recreation Commission. This is the November 9th meeting. And we had the presentation from the Comox Valley United Soccer Club. And of course, they're asking for new lit artificial turf fields, 2 of them. There was a sports field study done in 2008, and they're working on updating the study. And they're also working, wanting to work with the local clubs for this new artificial turf, kind of going hand in hand. So they're trying to update the study at the same time. They don't want to delay looking at the artificial turf option, and, prior to getting the study completely done. Also, adult ice users public engagement plan. So between November and August, they want to hear from the stakeholders to determine the wants and the needs. As always, there's not enough ice and lots of users. So they're trying to gather the stakeholders together and hear about it. There was some concern over the public health order for pools, because apparently you don't have to prove vaccination to go into the pool. But it's been determined that we'll just continue to observe the public health orders. So that will remain the same. And we reaffirmed the strategic plan for the Recreation Committee. And then the other one was the CBRD board meeting, where we had the Walk With Me presentation. And just a reminder, I'm sure everybody got the reminder that there's the Walk With Me session on November 28th. And the Community Health Network also did a presentation talking about the substance abuse strategy, and of course looking for financial support. And the local fire chiefs came and talked about their response to the wildfires in the provincial, at the provincial level in the summertime. And then lastly, I went to the Elders Take Action group meeting yesterday, where it was just a chat and coffee. And of course, number 1 priority is affordable housing, top of mind for everybody. And that's my report.
Yeah, thanks for taking that on, because I couldn't remember if we reported that out or not either. But I did attend the regional district meeting and the sports meeting. And at the sports meeting, the artificial turf field came up. We got a presentation, and it was very well received. And I think that it's something that the RD, which is, I think, the right place for it to be, are really going to look at what it's going to cost and how we're going to fund it, and see what we can do, because there's a big need out there. So I also listened to the all candidates debate last night, and I think they promised about $4 trillion worth of stuff out there. So they should have seen that presentation before, because it was interesting to watch. But and I also had a meeting with Chair Kettler. It's an annual meeting that we have, and they just want to know if there's any concerns of what we do. And a couple of things that I brought up was the amount of debt that we're incurring at the regional district between water plants and sewer and just all the myriad of things. It's a staggering amount of money. And so just wanted to make sure that they keep cognizant of, and there's nothing, I mean, it's all stuff you have to do, but just to be aware of that. And the other issue that I brought up to her was the AAP process, or the alternate approval process. They took, I think, about 17 issues and put them all into one. And, you know, it was thought at the board that was a really good idea. I never liked it. And the public just really don't like that. And so, you know, sometimes it's a useful tool, but I just want them to be aware that it's not something that the public really likes. They like to at least think they get a say in it. And at that process, it's a very difficult process to overturn if you don't like it. So anyway, those were the things that I brought to her.
Thanks. Attended the modernizing forestry webinar as well last week, and then just met with some of the candidates for the by-election.
Councillor Minions?
Yeah, attended the modernizing forestry workshop that was held by the provincial partnerships. Watched the Chamber of Commerce all candidates meeting last night, so thanks to the Chamber and Bill and Ben for doing that. And I talked to one resident who was dissatisfied on our level of bylaw interventions down by Brooklyn Creek and Mackline with dogs off leash, which I hadn't heard for a little while. So that was a good topic to have brought back up, and just talking about good neighbors and kind of kindly reminding people of what the rules are. And I'll have to take a walk down there to see what the signage is like these days. Thank you.
Thanks. And for myself, I've been meeting with some new people coming into town, a new couple, and just wanting to get the lay of the land and pointing them in the right direction to see what they can offer the community. Did the child development telethon. There's another group, the Compass Communications. They met with myself here in the council chambers about their new endeavor that they're going to be doing with public radio. Had a quick BIA meeting, the Remembrance Day celebrations, and the Salvation Army had their 25th anniversary for the Pidcock shelter there in Courtney. So I attended that on the weekend, and that's a really good place they have there, and well received. So that's all I have, and nothing further. Motion to, oh, sorry, Don. Yes, I forgot all about you. Yeah. Yeah, I just saw that little hand there. They did on lots 1,500 square meters or larger.
And I don't think we have to wait for this one in Coastal Marina, but I think I sort of heard Clive or Jordan at some time say that at one time we.
Yeah, I think one of the big issues has been we haven't actually done the work to find out how much it's going to cost to replace the marina, and I'm not sure if that work has ever been done. So that's what we're going to be hopefully getting to the bottom of this year. But we have increased the amount that we're putting into the reserves. So the reserves total right now about $600,000, and we're putting $100,000 in a year. But hopefully by the end of this year, again, we'll know what the asset replacement value is. We'll know how long it's going to be before it needs to be replaced, and then we'll figure out a funding strategy.
Talk of the marina, are you including the walkway in the building, or are you just talking about?
I'm just talking about the place where the boats go.
The fingers in the docks.
Yeah, so it's, sorry, not
there
to,
you go.
not,
You can tell he's from Tumbler Ridge. Yeah.
where all the floaty things are. Sorry, and that's not to say we're not going to be looking at the cost of replacement on the other infrastructure, but that we're going to be looking to tie the rates of the marina into the replacement of the actual marina.
All right, thank you. And nothing further from public questions. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Good, thank you. Have a good evening.